welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ivan Strachenberger. I'm going to moderate that panel. We have 4 fantastic guests. So I will keep my speaking to a very minimum because you want to hear from them. We had agreed on one rule. We want the panel to be lively, provocating, and engaging. So please help us with this. Ask those gentlemen, and lady actually, tough questions. I'm going to ask them some questions as well, and we really want to debate as opposed to them say, like my person next to me said, I'm going to echo this. So if we do this, that's yellow card and that's red card afterwards. So let me start with a quick provocative introduction in there. So depending on the perspective, you could claim that here you have somebody working for a dinosaur selling overpriced textbooks. Curtis Barnes there, Pearson.
I'm a T-Rex, though.
You have Dr. Lombardi here, which is working for a university that if you listen to Clayton Christensen, has probably 50% chance of disappearing in the next few years. That's what the prediction is. You have Catherine working basically for a greedy for-profit insurance company. And you have Pete working on some really cool thing, but is it really taking off? Is it really changing the world here? So, just setting the stage a little bit there. I know they don't feel this way. They haven't worked out, which is great. Thank you. But it's kind of set the tone a little bit for the discussion. So my first question to all of you very briefly is that I'm sure you have children, nephews, nieces, and so on. When you tell them to go to college, what do you tell them? And let me give you 3 options, and you can't tell me all of the above. 1, to land a great job. 2, party and have fun because you don't get those days back. Or 3, you're going to basically acquire a body of knowledge that will be useful for your life. So pick one. Which one would it be? Dr. Lombardi.
I'll pick the 4th option, which is it's to prepare you not just for a career, but many careers, because we're all going to have many careers in our lifetime. College is designed to do that. It should be designed to do that. Most colleges are not. Ours is.
Okay. Catherine?
When I think about it as a mother of a teenager, I think about it a little differently than I would as an employer. And so I'm going to give you the mom answer, and that is there are things that you discover through a liberal arts education that I think set you on fire and add a quality and dimension to your life through that exposure that I think is really enriching. I think having the foundation of that is a value for all citizens who want to pursue it. I don't necessarily think that equates to landing a good job. There are tons of people out there with art history degrees that may or may not be able to find employment, but I still think that there is overall quality of life in pursuing education. And so, I would want him to pursue things that set him on fire, that inspire him, and that add dimension to his life, not just help him get a great job. Although I only have one, so I've got all my eggs in this one basket. He needs a good job.
Yeah.
Curtis?
I think Catherine should drop the mic. So I've got 3 teenage daughters, and they don't, and while we're lucky and we can have them, go get, learned and learn how to learn and gain the skills they need to be, employable, that's really not the challenge we have as a country, right? The average, learner, post-secondary learner in the United States is about 28 and has a kid and a half, and their challenges are quite distinct. So I would say it's really about employability to answer the question the right way.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, so I've got 2 in college right now, and the advice I gave both of them was the same. One of them took it and the other one didn't. And it was to build a sort of foundational core thinking and communication skills, ability to interact with other people. That was the advice. So pursue a liberal arts degree. One of them is at Gettysburg doing that. The other one went to NC State, where he wants to major in engineering. He is majoring in engineering, so he can get a good job. I think they're actually both kind of accomplishing their purposes. Echoing what Curtis is saying, though, we're kind of an elite audience, right? I mean, we're all probably thinking about kids that will go and pursue a degree as a goal. And I'm not sure as a society that makes a lot of sense for us democratically, right? There are shorter term goals that we can help people accomplish using learning so that they can get to that first job. I've got one client in particular who works in the community college system in California, and he says the first job we need to do as educators is help people pay for rent and diapers. If we can get them satisfied so they're on a career track and they're paying the rent, then we've earned the right to talk to them about other higher education goals.
Okay, great. So let's talk about, so I think you all agree that we need to prepare those young and not young students basically for the future. Let's talk about how we prepare them for the corporate world. If you talk to employers, institutions, learners, I think they all agree that it's not working well. Everybody talks, cross-talk to each other, there's no alignment here. Employers say, you send us a bunch of qualified, overqualified, underqualified, students with a lot of debt in here. Institutions say we send you great people, blah, 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 blah. What is broken? What are we doing to really bring together the world of the corporate world and the education world? How do we reconcile faculty with the for-profit world?
Well, higher ed is broken, and it's broken because for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is it's been insulated. It's probably the only institution more insulated than higher ed is religions. And so insulated from change. First step is to design curriculum with industry partners and corporations and others in the room. You've got to open up the doors. You've got to open up that ability for faculty, administrators, corporate executives, and others to design curriculum together so that it meets the needs of what these jobs and what these careers and what these opportunities are. And what goes along with that, which is referenced by some of my colleagues here, is a lot of soft skill development as well, ability to work in teams, ability to problem solve, ability to create. So the real problem is higher ed, and it is being disrupted dramatically, and that's a good thing, and it needs to be. But when you open the doors of curriculum development to people from the outside, only good things happen.
So can you give us some examples of things you've been doing in Maryville or you're looking at?
We sat down with Edward Jones Financial Company and talked to them about what they were missing and the people they were hiring. They were losing 40% of their hires out of the gate in the first year. We designed a financial services degree with them in the room to address the issues that they were seeing in their new hires. That's one example. We've done that same model in sports business management, obviously in our healthcare profession programs and many others. If you hold on to control too much of anything, but certainly of curriculum, you'll lose it all.
So Catherine, what is the one thing you would like Dr. Lombardi to do? I think you in the same area as well. What is the one advice, the one thing you really want him to change the way he engage with you as a corporation?
Just one thing?
Start with one, maybe two.
I think that meeting the learner where they're at. We have learners or employees who come to us who have obtained an education, and that education is a pathway to a job, right? So they come in through internships, through rotational programs, through first job experiences. But we also have a good portion of our organization that see employment as a pathway to education. To your point, it creates accessibility for them. Or in a lot of cases, a tremendous amount of our folks come in and obtain their grad degree while they're working with us. And so making sure that there's flexibility, that we're thinking in terms of learner engagement and satisfaction. I wish that my team had the ability to coach and guide and mentor all of our adult learner employees that are in programs with places like Maryhurst, but there's just no scale. We can't do it. So I think the organizations that we're partnering with that have gotten really smart about that, about knowing, well, they haven't logged in to complete an assignment, or they haven't been active, or things like that. Let's reach out and check on them. Let's see what we can do to help them be successful. That's of tremendous value. Because it allows people to stay on track or to do the right thing given their circumstances at the time. And we just can't manage that as a corporation. The other thing that Maryville's done, which is fantastic, is that we partner with them on an RN to BSN degree. And so having academic partnerships that understand the unique situation that our employee base is in and the type of flexibility they need and programming they need is really important. In fact, we've beginning to have conversations with them about the types of master's programs that are really going to be most important for our nurses.
Pete, there is an explosion of new formats, micro-credentials, short certificates, online, offline, whatever there. What are your views on how it's going to change the relationship between education providers, whether they're big institutions or others, and the corporate world? And how do the badges play a role in here? How do we create more flexibility and fluidity in the system?
Sure. So the badge format's being used to represent all different kinds of alternative credentials at this point, right? Small units of learning, individual skills, broader competencies, entire skill sets, professional certificates, even diplomas and degrees. So across the whole spectrum, you've got, for the first time, you've got a common format to understand what's the learning that lives behind this credential. And that's going to open up a lot of interesting possibilities. A couple of things that we're working on now that we've spent the first early days putting forward this common format. The first is helping adults to get credit for what they already know and not have them start back at point zero again. And I think for corporations, this is a friction point because they don't want to interact with universities and have them send everybody back to square zero. So how can we help people complete that goal, whether it's a degree or a professional certificate or even a professional certification, without having to start over from ground zero, right? And then promoting cross-collaboration across corporate and education providers such that there's co-branding. Give you an example. One of the most valuable badges in the platform right now across, let's say, 30 million credentials that are in the platform. Microsoft and INSEAD Business School collaborated on essentially a professional certificate program on cloud-based business models. Microsoft is migrating itself from a packaged software company to a cloud company, and they needed to retrain their own staff and their entire value chain. That Microsoft INSEAD credential is claimed 100% of the time by the earners. And the reason they like it, and we've done some follow-up studies with them, is because it's branded both Microsoft and INSEAD, not one or the other individually. So
do you see these badges becoming currency as valid as a 2-year or 4-year degree from university? Do you think that's the future?
Depends on the student. It depends on where they are in their life journey and process, career, and so on. For some, it's going to an accumulation of certain things is going to mean more than simply a 2 or 4-year degree. For others, it won't be. The key to what Catherine was saying as well is it's personalized. You have to create an educational environment, both within universities and outside in partnership, that allows each individual to decide at that point in their life what do they need and what do they not need, rather than force feed them something in a manufactured, mass-produced way that you say, well, you all need this. Those days are over. I mean, I like to cook, but I'm not a good cook. So do I go to cooking school, or do I put on a YouTube and find out how to cook a pizza? I put on YouTube and I find a pizza YouTube video and I try it. If it comes out good, I've learned how to cook a pizza. I don't need to go to cooking school to learn how to cook. And so there's that element of this evolution that's happening that universities are embracing. Some universities are, many are resistant to it. And they're resistant to it because of culture, not because of the realities of life. And that's a huge, huge problem. Credentials, badges, certificates, all of that are not separate from an education. They're part of education.
I would say that from an employer standpoint that this creates a lot of challenge for employers because talent acquisition organizations are built on doing really well at understanding the unit of the degree. They know they can assess the rigor of the academic institution. They can think about what type of skills that created for the employee. They're not ready, I would say, with infrastructure or process to understand a skills-based approach to this. I think we're starting to get there. I think there's a lot of technology in the space that's starting to help us to do that and to make it easier. But I think it's going to require a real sea change in the way that we hire and assess people for organizations. The other thing that I think is kind of interesting about this is that there's such absolutism about it that I think we're trying to bend the arc of. So the day that I got my degree in political science, I did not become filled with all of these skills. I built them a block at a time along the way. Yet we place so much focus on that completion. And there are so many jobs that do not require a bachelor's degree, but we're currently requiring a bachelor's degree for. And there's opportunity, I think, to what you were saying, is to help deconstruct the coursework and help people better understand the skills that they're getting out of it. So if you took an English 101 class, what did you learn to do? What can you do as a result of that? And being able to empower learners to be able to speak that and translate that is something that I think is going to show greater value for those units or for those smaller micro pieces of it.
So Curtis, you run the learning ecosystem. So what is that? Because that's got nothing to do with textbooks, really. So how do we address that complexity that panelists are referring to, and how do we support that and sort of address this need to be customized, flexible, modular, and bring all these parties together?
So all those things, and there's a couple themes here. One is scale. So we have a lot of activities that are happening in pockets, and you come to this conference and there's an opportunity to talk across the industry boundaries. But the only way it's really going to work is if we animate all the stakeholders. We've got to talk about how these stackable credentials actually become currency, not just for an employee within an organization, but across the boundaries, right? So the INSEAD Microsoft credential means something because it's got an effective brand on it, but a soft skill credential, critical thinking, adaptivity, or resilience, who's gonna own and brand that? And somehow we've got to get the ecosystem animated around that to give us that currency, right? So that it can be something an individual can transact against is one thing. And the scale topic here is a big one. Even inside Pearson, yes, we do have these things called textbooks. They lend themselves to digital courseware. Digital courseware is delivered on a notion. One thing Pearson does really well is we know how people learn. And we construct our courses in a way that optimizes for that learning experience. And it's typically leverages a concept called learning objectives. Well, that's an academic outcome. Why aren't we being more intentional about workplace skill outcomes as well? And we should certainly, and we are, looking at how do we bake into particularly our digital courseware, not just things that lead to a grade and an academic outcome, but could be potentially leveraged as an example of in career use of a specific kind of skill. That's an important piece of that. It's a Mount Everest problem, right? It's a very big issue, but we need to begin solving for that.
So it's an exciting time. There are a lot of solutions, credentials, badges, degrees, a lot of ideas, a lot of great companies out there. Do we need to regulate that? How do we assess the quality of the skills, the quality of learning? How do we make sure that institutions have been trusted, for most of them, obviously Maryville for sure. So that's a little easier, but now it's all over the place. And I think, Catherine, as you said yourself, it's tough to know what's good, what's not good, all these pieces come together. Should the government get involved?
Oh, dear God, no.
So those are great, with the great examples looking at the UK, particularly around the apprenticeship programs that they've been developing the last couple of years. Yes, it is a public-private thing, and yes, the government instituted mandatory fees from employers, the percentage of revenue basis. But the minute it got going, the government backed off and said it's now a marketplace problem to solve for. And I think it's a really good example and something that certainly in the United States we should be looking very closely at as we think about alternative pathways.
Yeah, and certainly the signals we send to prioritize different models over others need to come through policy and through funding decisions. So right now, the reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act and whether or not we should free up government money to be able to go for professional certificates as well as for degree programs is a hotly debated topic. But that does reflect one of these market-driven changes, which is that you may not need a whole degree in order to advance to the next level at your job or get your next professional opportunity. So I think to the degree the government is involved, it's us as taxpayers continuing to fund public universities and public further education, but also the less traditional formats, so professional certificates, for instance, while ensuring this kind of common quality level so you don't just get Joe's Internet Education Service trying to provide something that is more properly quality delivered through an existing institution.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. But Joe's always going to be out there trying to pull a fast one. There's always going to be somebody wanting to make a quick buck in anything, but and education's so different. But the key, it seems to me, ultimately is the only validation of certificates, badges, degrees, whatever it is. Does the employer entity want to hire that person? And number two, after they hire them, are they glad they did? Outcome is the only thing that matters. From a student perspective, if you really believe that we're educating each individual student individually and personalized and not mass educating, which is what I went through, then the only ultimate outcome is that. Not grades, not GPA, not any of that crap. It's employers want those students who've gone through whatever, and once they get them, they see them as an asset and they want to keep them. And there's no other better way to validate. It's just like we have a big nursing program, physical therapy, occupational therapy. I love them, and one of the reasons I love them is we have a profession of nursing that outside of higher ed that validates the education we provide. If 100% of our nurses pass the board, which happens often, and 100% of them are employed and they want to be there, and I've got Mercy and I've got all these different health networks wanting to hire our nurses, then I know we're doing a hell of a job educationally. That is the only outcome, it seems to me, that not government regulation per se, although there may be room for some things, but that's the only thing that we can say and hang our hat on is, yes, absolutely. You got a 97% career placement rate in the student's chosen field and they're successful, then you're doing what you said you were going to do.
Mark, I think I remember from our call last week, you said that I think it was 11% of 18 to 25-year-olds are actually gainfully self-employed, right? So that the criteria may not be as invaluable to an employer, but does it make the individual productive and self-sustained? And the big change in the workforce in the 21st century is that we're all, in effect, freelance and contract workers, right? So we need to own and control that notion of self-agency is really becoming central to the educational model. And maybe we're doing a disservice if we don't present to students the idea that they should all be entrepreneurs.
Well, and that gets at the whole point of tearing out the fact that education, K through 12 and secondary, in this country and everywhere else has always been linear. And now we're moving into an era where it has to be circular, 360 degree. And students of all ages enter it in different ways at different times in different forms. Which is not to say that there's no more kindergarten or whatever, but we have students on our campus. I have one student who graduated on our campus who was making $600,000–700,000 a year with his business before he graduated. He automatically became one of my best donors, right? Trust me, I'm very good friends with him. I answer his phone call every time. But I mean, that reality is that may be an outlier today. I don't know if it's going to be an outlier 3 or 4 years from now.
I think it's a really good, I just think it's a really good riff that I know we're here to talk about post-secondary, but I mean, we need to rethink the way that we actually socialize and our entire paradigm around profession and education. I mean, when you start to think that my son, who was born in 2005, has a really strong chance of living 100 years. And if his health sustains, working until he's 80 and contributing in a really, important way. It would have made no sense for me to go back to school and become a pharmacist at 40 because I wouldn't have had the runway to get the return on investment for that, or to become an attorney. For him, mid-career shifts, being able to really recalibrate midlife or have multiple professions over the course of your life is going to be something that is not only needed, but common, especially as industry shifts and the market changes. So I think that the flexibility in thinking about that and starting to engage young people to think in terms of the type of domain knowledge sets they want to engage in, the types of experiences they want to have, and asking questions instead of, when you grow up, what do you want to be? Thinking about, when you grow up, what kind of problems do you want to solve, or what type of things do you want to create in the world?
So I would like to jump into questions. One thing I would like to ask as you prepare the questions and ask them, they're ready for tough questions. all this is great, but if I'm a learner today, it's overwhelming. Yes. I mean, how do I navigate through all this, between what my employer wants, the money I have, the money I want to spend, the funding, micro-credentials, badges, and so on. I mean, like 20 years ago, you would basically go to primary school, high school, college, for the most part, get a job, and so on. Now, you have self-employment, and I mean, what do we do to help those learners? They're smart. They will find a way. And by the way, the learner is not only the 16-year-old child going from high school to college. It's also the course completers. It's also the career change person as well. So are we going to do enough to help them? We should step up and do that. Curtis, do you want to?
Yeah, it's a central problem. And plenty of research on this. There are 30, some odd, 40, depending whose numbers you believe, people who started an undergraduate degree and didn't complete it. I think it's really, what Dr. Lombardi was talking about earlier is that the current system is broken, the degree model's broken. We need to provide many different, pathways in for people to scale education and do it the time, the place, the modality, and the price point that they can afford at that point in time. And we also, in interesting conversations happening with employers around, how do we change the funding model for individual learners? So it isn't this, big kind of episodic, I go to a, college or university for 4 years and lay down, hopefully 4 years, right? And lay down, my family's inheritance to complete it. That model is, it works for some people, it can't work for all. And that's the central issue. So if we create, finer chunks, give people different pathways to achieve things that make them employable, and maybe it stacks out to, what looks like a traditional degree model over a period of time, but gives people the opportunity to pivot, in their career path to find the things that makes them most passionate about what they're trying to do.
I think one of our partnerships with Pearson is a good example of a way that we've found helpful, and that is when you think about the massive investment that most large organizations make around either tuition reimbursement or some benefit to pay for education, organizations are not set up to be able to help the adult learners that are employees navigate those systems. And in partnership with Pearson, we've been able, through their accelerated pathways, to get academic advising for our employees that are thinking about going back to school, and be able to look at, really a cost-benefit analysis spreadsheet of how long will it take, what type of, cost would I be investing in this particular school, and really helping inform them around choice. And I think that is something that needs to grow even more, whether it be not just around degree programs, but also, to your point, around credentialing and badges, like what's a good investment for me to make, or what's the cost-benefit analysis of that?
And that's why the Amazon model is instructive here. We're all pouring out enormous volumes of data about ourselves every day, every moment of every day. The key is that in the data analytics, it's understanding what makes everyone tick, it's learning diagnostics and data analytics. Once you have those profiles of students, and we've been doing this at Maryville for a few years now through our life coaching program, then you can provide that kind of tailored, personalized advice and counseling, if you will, over time, not just during a particular part of their career, but for their whole career. I mean, what we're building towards is a lifelong career services model that is free of charge, life coaching, free, doesn't cost you a dime, that you can always come back to and you can always access, because we've amassed that data. Just like when, I buy the 12th biography of Winston Churchill on Amazon and have it, downloaded, then they know what I'm interested in, and they keep pushing out, every book on World War II that they've got, and movie. So it's the answers in the data. That's how you personalize it to a level that can provide this kind of counseling, and it should be 24/7, which involves the implementation of AI.
So Big Brother in higher ed.
Big Brother, for good reason, for good stuff.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Yes, there is a microphone at the back there. Anybody has any questions? Is it back there?
I've got a comment to make while you're all thinking about your questions to the Big Brother comment. I think it's going to be incredibly important that individuals control their own learning records.
Yes.
And to the extent they want to contribute them into an AI-driven counseling model, they'd be free to opt into that. But they could also time limit that. They could put conditions on it. They can set a context around in what conditions can you use my records and what kind of insights, what's the quid pro quo here? So, from our perspective, that's where we try and advocate, is always from the perspective of the learner, and you always control your own data.
So for what it's worth, I agree with it. In a previous life, I ran a company called InBloom. That was a K-12 data management, or data enabler. Pete, absolutely right, because it's complicated. And the benefits are clear, the pitfalls are real, and the perception is very, very complex to manage. So,
and there's real legal risk involved.
There are.
I mean, we've seen GDPR in the EU already put a damper on almost everything that big companies have and can do with individuals and their online presence. That's coming, it's in California now, it's coming to the rest of the United States, and rightfully so.
So are we doing anything about that? I mean, is anybody aware of any initiatives to share data, find ways for the learners to share data with each other in a controlled way so that they can actually have a great experience, a great learner and learning experience? Is it something Pearson should help and build?
Possibly. There are a lot of examples of companies that have tried to position themselves at the center of this and say, we're going to own the data landscape and either park it under a traditional university or whatever. I very much agree with Pete's point of view. It's got to be controlled by the learner. But finding that trust model is going to be tricky. And this is one where policy is not caught up to what technology can do. We don't have a clear set of answers. And yeah, there's a lot of talk. I was at a session run by the APLU back in December. Haven't heard a thing since. And the ambition's there, the intentionality seems to be there, but the struggle's always the next step of how do we actually action this, and how do we find the right model for this. So I'm often quick to say I don't believe there's going to be a dominant player, an Amazon or Netflix type player in education. So it's really important that we figure out collectively this ecosystem concept so that we have data exchange models that look a lot like other industries do this. They trade data with each other to improve the whole thing. The metaphor I'd use is we got a bunch of little data puddles, maybe a couple data lakes. We don't have a data ocean yet. And not until we have the ocean will kind of all boats rise, to kind of complete the metaphor. And it's not going to happen organically. It's going to require hard work that is policy, that is kind of a trust model with agreed upon transactional models for how these things flow and who benefits and in what ways.
That may be where government comes in with the same stipulations around healthcare records or anything else, which is if Maryville University collects all this data and uses it to give life coaching to students, the minute we even think about trying to sell that data, then we're out of business. I mean, there are ways to put up firewalls on that kind of a thing, certainly for universities and other entities, that we would be absolutely foolish and unethical to violate. But I mean, the concept that we can provide life coaching on a whole spectrum of issues for a student based on who that student is and what they tell us who they are, is absolutely essential if we're going to have true personalized education, or else it's going to be some more sophisticated technological version of the same warehouse education I got. Some people will get it and some people won't. The reality is everybody in this room can learn just about anything they want to learn. If you believe that you're a bad writer or you believe you're bad at math because God decided you were going to be bad at writing or math, you're crazy. You're bad at writing and math because you had bad teachers and bad instructors. That's the bottom line. Everybody in this room can learn these things. It's just finding the right key to unlock it from a learning diagnostic standpoint and approach. That's what all the brain research tells. This is not me. It's what all the research on the brain tells us. It's what all the learning research tells us over and over and over again. We've ignored it because of our own failings and frailties. But the bottom line is, with that knowledge, we can help people achieve their goals educationally, workplace, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as long as it's used for those purposes, I think it's a huge effort at the democratization of knowledge and information that's going to be the cornerstone of this century.
Questions? Got 4 minutes left, so that's the time to ask the questions. Otherwise, I got quite a few more I would love to hear our panelists on. Yes, over there. It's very quiet.
Hi there. Great panel. Question on the ecosystem. Tactically, what are the things that you would want to see happen in the next 5 years to actually build it? Is it a standards play? Is it consortia? Like, what's going to breathe life into it?
Yeah, so it's kind of a D, all of the above. But the tactics, the steps we're taking, Pearson, is this notion of kind of animating things. So reaching out, across what have traditionally been maybe silos or boundaries, and trying to drive conversation, getting plugged into networks that are generating activity. It's pretty interesting. Just reflecting on this conference and the tone this year versus the last few, I'm seeing a lot of actors who are ecosystem actors first. They're coming in with a very broad view. They're not trying to sell a product or a service or sell their business to somebody. They're kind of thinking broadly about how do we engage the dialogue and pick off the things that need to happen. Yes, standards are critical. The good news, at least in the post-secondary market space, is we have fewer standards than we had a few years ago, right? The policy, that's a problem, and we've got an ebb and flow topic there, but we need some support to drive policy decisions. We need to deepen the engagement with the employer population and our academic partners, and really bring that intentionality component deeper into the curriculum so that we're clear on that. Frankly, I think what happens over the next 5 years is we try a few things out, some other players try a few things out. Maybe everything sticks, maybe nothing sticks, but we'll learn from it, and that's going to be the most important part of the process.
And let me just add one quick thing. You got to start out, if you build an ecosystem, you got to start out by wiping the slate clean. From a university perspective, structure, all the assumptions that you have that the university is based on have to be wiped out of your mind, and you have to start from scratch. If you try to just patch and tinker and whatever, you're not creating an ecosystem. You're just fixing a hole in the roof.
I think that there's a pitch and a catch to all of this, and I think that if we stay in a model where we're thinking about competition and scarcity, that we're going to continue to be in the space we're in right now, to your point. I think that what we need is employers in partnership with each other, thinking about how talent might move between in order to benefit all of those employers, and on the same end have higher education institutions think about it that way also. We have multiple partners for nursing programs, and they're all very different based on what the learner might need or what they're wanting to pursue. So we're in a fortunate situation where our partners see that there may be a student that would be a better fit in another program, and they will openly say that. That's not the experience in everywhere, that we have that type of willingness. I also think that there's an onus of partnership on employer groups. So, we have a lot of nurses in our population. One of the challenges of the nurse shortage is we don't have enough nurse educators. We need to really work with higher education institutions to let our really, really capable, talented, brilliant nurses participate in nurse education in order to help all boats rise.
They're hired.
So I think we're running out of time. We did not ask, go ahead, quick question, then I think
I just have one question.
That's good.
I just have one question. So I'm curious, we're talking about, I love the notion of this sort of currency of education, the portability of it, the fact that we've got degrees as sort of the starting point and the currency of credentialing on an ongoing basis. How does sort of the social currency of on-the-job learning factor into it? I mean, I come at it from I'm in the I train software developers, I work with a lot of tech-driven companies, and the constant narrative is, I don't care about the piece of paper that you have from the college you went to. What I care about is what you can do. So how does the sort of social currency of that validation come in? How do we map sort of the talent landscape and have kind of an on-the-go, you know, you've learned this, you can do it, there's your stamp, keep moving, versus sort of always having to pass a test or whatever that thing might be to get the validation.
Yeah, I think the tech economy is a great example of where the leading employers are doing this from experience-based outcomes. So they're not requiring necessarily that you complete the certification exam or the degree in this area. They're saying, we saw you do it, we're going to give you a credential that backs that. Happy to talk more about that afterwards. I can give you lots of examples.
I'm going to mimic what I heard in the keynote yesterday, which spoke to my heart because it's my everyday experience. The woman from Pymetrics was talking about, if you need a good data scientist, you better start looking internally. Look at folks you have in your organization who have an interest in that, who you know are a good fit for your culture, who you have developed a relationship with, and start skilling them up, start getting them ready, and start doing it now. Because going out on the market right now for a data scientist, you're going to overpay, and you're going to run a risk that they're not going to be a good cultural fit for your organization.
Yeah, we've had several groups tell us they want to hire a data scientist in parts, and that's the benefit of skill-based hiring, right? So you get one person who's strong in statistics, you get another one who's strong in experimental design, you get a third who's strong in customer interactions and surveys. You bring them all together, data visualization specialist, you fill that role but with multiple people in fractional parts.
So we're going to have to finish. I started basically on a very negative comment on our panelists there by profession. I have to tell you, I know them, I know what they do, I know what we do at Pearson as well. There's some amazing things going on. So I was by design provocative. The amount of innovation going on in Maryville, in Humana, Credly, and obviously at Pearson as well is incredible. So if you have a chance to engage with them one-on-one or have any questions, it's absolutely fascinating. It's tough to give justice to this in a few minutes, but it's a great journey, and it's very exciting for me to be part of this exciting journey. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for panelists.